Hi, I am Natalie Rose Martin, founder of ArborVitae Mystery School. This video is all about the energetics of smoking and really why it's a good idea to stop. Now, I realized I wanted to make this video as a bonus for the free New Paradigm Leadership 10-day boot camp, which you can sign up for in the comments below the video because I really didn't address smoking in the boot camp, and this is a really important piece. In fact, this has been a key piece for my own personal development, growth, healing, and evolution. So we're going to get into it. Now, before we get into talking about smoking itself, let's take a moment with these plants, the plants that tend to be smoked by people: cannabis and tobacco. They are both powerful medicines in their own rights and deserve their place at the earth medicine table. However, the relationships that we have developed with these plants are very out of balance and are causing much more harm than good when smoked, especially in excess. My relationship with both of these plants started around 14 years old. Yes, I was smoking cannabis and tobacco at 14 years old, and I was addicted to smoking cigarettes for 15 years. And I had an on again, off again relationship with smoking cannabis for much longer than that. I quit smoking tobacco during my Saturn return at the end of my 20s. And this was a key decision for me for a massive and radical lifestyle overhaul that ultimately led me on the path of doing healing work. Tobacco has a long history of traditional use, which includes smoking together in a ceremonial prayer. And it also includes other forms of taking either a powder or a liquid into the nose to clear and ground. Now, I am not trained in these traditional ways, and I choose not to take tobacco into my body in any form at this point. But I can tell you that the spirit of the tobacco plant told me to stop inhaling it. Traditionally, the inhalation of tobacco smoke is for a prayer for the self, and a non-inhalation, a puff, is a prayer for others. And what tobacco told me is that we people have been abusing the privilege of using it to pray for ourselves and become unconscious in that pattern, and please stop. So at this point, my relationship with the tobacco plant includes breathing prayers into the plant matter, into the dried leaf, and offering that to a ceremonial fire to carry the prayers forth. So I'm just sharing all of that to illuminate that there are many ways to be in relationship with the spirit of this plant and its medicine, and to offer support for you to stop smoking if that is something that you're still doing. Now, I would characterize the shadow of tobacco as a smooth talking, narcissistic manipulator. Like, it will convince you any which way, slippery around behind, get up in your brain way it can find to get you to smoke it. So, extricating yourself from the relationship with tobacco really requires a strong commitment, and then a willingness to be vigilant against the smooth talking manipulations of the spirit of the plant as it winds its way through and attempts to get you to loop back in with it. It's very tricky and will do whatever it can to convince you to get back into the dance. Okay, let's take a look at cannabis. Cannabis is nearly legal at this point. It has been researched and developed and proven to be really effective and beneficial medicine, especially for pain and for nausea. And, its derivatives are available. CBD, you can have CBD without the THC, and CBD is actually really effective medicine for epilepsy, among other things. So there's some good medicine available here for sure. And I would characterize the shadow of cannabis as a jealous, possessive, feminine lover. So, in a different way than tobacco, she will use her feminine wiles to draw you back into her sticky clutches. So, you want to keep an eye on that and ensure that you're making conscious choices about when to be with her and when to be clear of her. And that is relevant for any which way you ingest it, whether it's eating it or smoking it. And that brings us to smoking. So, the energetics of smoking anything creates a smoke screen. Tobacco is especially good at numbing emotions. And cannabis is especially good at like creating a shield between us and the rest of the world. So, sensitive folks and people who have naturally more porous boundaries are going to be drawn to smoking as a way to mitigate that sensitivity and that porosity of boundaries. We can really use this smoke screen to hide behind. Now, folks will say that smoking tobacco helps ground them. This is because they are not grounded in themselves and they're reaching outside of themselves for this tool to ground them and shield from the exquisite tenderness of being a sensitive person alive on this planet. So, approaching quitting smoking tobacco or changing the dynamics of the relationship with that medicine, with that plant, really requires some careful tending of the energetic system. So, you want to be practicing grounding, you want to be cultivating your energetic boundaries, and you want to be cultivating a capacity to really be with the feelings that do arise when you're not numbing them and hardening that outer shell with the consistent use of tobacco. Now, I would recommend the use of flower essences to support that process, and I would recommend Nicotiana, which is the tobacco flower. That flower essence is specifically for supporting um, the release of the hardened emotional shell that goes along with smoking, and especially for men, the need to maintain a hard exterior in order to be perceived as masculine or tough. That whole picture is very supported by Nicotiana flower essence, but I would recommend it for anyone who is working on changing their relationship with tobacco or stopping smoking. Additionally, I would recommend the yarrows. The yarrow family of flower essences are all for shoring up porous boundaries. They all support different facets of having a strong auric field and healthy, resilient, flexible, energetic boundaries. So that's white yarrow for general auric strengthening, pink yarrow for emotional boundaries, golden yarrow for social boundaries. And then if you make your own flower essences, I realized last year the sort of paprika, reddish paprika color of yarrow is for mental boundaries. So if you find yourself like picking up on other people's thoughts a lot, that's a helpful one there. I remember one of the times I attempted to quit feeling so exposed. I felt like a huge dork. Like if I could sit by myself and smoke a cigarette, then I was like fine. I was cool. I was like in relationship with something. I was like doing something. I was, you know, fine. And then without it, I was just sitting there, like totally exposed, naked, with no cool facade, no exterior at all. I just felt very exposed. So, so yeah, I definitely recommend the flower essence support for quitting smoking tobacco. One more piece about that is that I was fortunate enough to discover the root cause of my tobacco addiction in therapy. And so when I quit, like actually for real all the way, 13 years ago, almost 14 years ago, I quit. I was able to refer back to that root cause every time a craving came up, which was like every 10 minutes. It's pretty intense. Every 10 minutes, the craving would come up, and I'd be like, well, what are you going to do about that root cause? And I would just turn my attention back to that. And I found that to be super helpful because it took my attention off of the tobacco and on to myself and the place where I like actually had power to create change. And I believe that is why I quit so very thoroughly and haven't had any temptation to get back involved with smoking tobacco. And finally, I found it very helpful for a couple of years after I quit when going to certain social situations like parties to have a smoking blend with me because the craving did pop up here and there in certain situations. And then I would roll a little cigarette of Damiana, which is similar to tobacco in that it's both a stimulant and a relaxant, and slightly altering, slightly less altering than tobacco is, but definitely has an effect. And so a combination of Damiana and mullein, which is a lung herb, which like supports lung health even when you smoke it. I mean, I wouldn't do it to excess, but it can be helpful for asthma attacks and clearing up lung stuff. And then I would put a tiny bit of white sage in that combination. And the white sage is clearing, it's energetically clearing, and it also would keep it burning. So it would act more like a regular cigarette and not go out every 2 seconds. So I recommend that also to support the process of quitting tobacco, is to just have a little herbal blend on hand in case there's a situation that would really challenge and really test you. Because I know so often those are the situations where people will re-engage, and then that little sneaky hook gets re-engaged in your system, and then there's like a whole nother process of having to unwind it. So if you can unhook all the way, the level of freedom and liberation of not being addicted is outstanding. It's really amazing. Now, cannabis is a bit different because it doesn't have that hardcore physiologic addictive element that tobacco has. Not that people can't get addicted to it. I do know that that happens, but the physiologic aspect is much less to deal than with tobacco, which has a very intense physiologic component to its addiction. From a Chinese medicine perspective, heavy cannabis use liberates the spirit of the liver, encouraging visions and grandiosity. That's why we like it, right? It's like opens the mind and allows the creativity to blossom, and we can think of things that we couldn't think of before, and it's expansive. And meanwhile, the liver is being robbed of its yang energy, which would support actualizing the vision, right? Which is why folks who get into the habit of smoking regularly are challenged to actually accomplish and build things in the real world. Often, not always, but often this is the case. And that's because the liver energy is being deranged, right? Like the spirit is being expanded and blown out while the yang is being drained away. So not having that capacity to actually bring things through into materiality, into form. Now, the smoke screen with cannabis is much thicker and much heavier than the smoke screen with tobacco. Whereas the tobacco just addresses the emotions and creates that little edge of toughness around the emotions. The smoke screen that cannabis creates is much thicker. It's much more like a heavy, protective, fuzzy blanket. And in my dance with this medicine, as I went in and out of relationship with it for years, I would go, I think it's time to put the fuzzy blanket on for a while. And I would like crawl in and like let myself be held in that, which, that's good medicine. And I feel like there's a lot of reason for people to want that experience on the planet these days. But meanwhile, the fuzzy blanket is covering up your light, right? So I would go in for a while and then I'd be like, okay, I think I got to climb out of here. It's time to be bright again. It's time to radiate my light. And so I would take the heavy fuzzy blanket off and like it takes, some time for it to really clear from the field. And that's the downside of ingesting cannabis, is it really lasts longer in the system and takes longer to clear any fuzzy edges when you ingest it than when you smoke it. But folks who used to smoke, who don't anymore, but then will occasionally, can tell you that that fuzzy edge, that fuzzy feeling lasts for a couple of days. So, the recommendation with smoking cannabis is to do it very intentionally in a kind of a ceremonial container with the purpose of gaining access to that mind expansion that might not be available in other ways, and then to, give yourself a couple of days to clear from that experience and ground it, and then create action steps that feel viable and in line with what was inspiring about the visions that you created during the journey with the medicine. Another folks like to smoke cannabis regularly is because they feel it helps them to sleep better. Now, I know some folks have really good luck with like a CBD gummy, and it also can come with some of that attendant fuzzy edge the next day, which folks find challenging. But I want to highlight here another energetic of smoking cannabis, which is that it actually takes the energy up. It takes the energy up. And a consistent practice of smoking will consistently be taking the energy up, which actually disturbs the ability to sleep. So, by developing a habit of smoking cannabis to help yourself sleep, you're creating a dependency because the energy just keeps going up and up and up, and you think that that's what's helping you bring it down. And I know that people do find relief with sleep with this medicine, but it's ultimately a positive feedback loop that's creating the problem that it's trying to solve. So, for sleeping, I recommend using other herbs that don't come with this attendant fuzzy edge, or putting a fuzzy blanket over your light. My two favorite herbs for supporting sleep are passion flower and California poppy. I recommend both of these in fresh tincture form. So you'll want the tincture that has been made from the fresh plant. And depending on where you live, these both grow abundantly. Passion flower will take over a whole patch of your yard or your garden. And if you're on the West Coast, California poppy is everywhere. You don't want to harvest it from right by the road. You want to harvest it from, from somewhere a little more pristine than right by the road. But especially if you can grow it in your yard, California poppy really supports the deep sleep. Um, Passion flower is very relaxing, and the California poppy supports the deep sleep. So, those two herbs in combination, and then there are a million other herbs that could support that in formula, kind of depending on what else is going on for you. But chamomile is a good one, catnip is a good one, skullcap, if you have lots of mental chatter, that will help calm down the mental chatter. Anyway, I just support you choosing herbs to help you sleep that don't come with the attendant shadow of smoking cannabis. And if you're here to do big work in the world, we need your light shining bright. We need your light shining bright. So, in order to support that process, we need to find other ways to get that cozy, kind of protected, cared for feeling that cannabis can provide. So, how can you cultivate that feeling of being enveloped and cared for? Well, earthing practices are my favorite. So, lying in a sunny patch of grass anytime you get the chance, and really feeling the support, feeling held by the body of the mother, by the body of Mother Earth, really soaking that in. Um, a ritual bath is another great way to cultivate that experience of feeling held and cozy with the ability to expand. So that might look like candles and maybe some soft music and privacy, so you can really drop in and have the experience of feeling held, cradled, and also our relationships with people. I definitely found I would seek refuge in my relationship with the cannabis, and that would free me from having to seek refuge in my relationships with people. It felt safe. It felt really safe to seek refuge in my relationship with cannabis, and finding refuge in relationships with people is a little edgier, right? There's like other people's desires at play here. So I would invite you to choose a relationship or two to lean into and cultivate. And I would have a conversation with those people and say, hey, I'm going to shift my relationship with cannabis. I'm interested in, while I'm doing that, deepening my relationship with you. Do you feel available for that? What could that look like? How can we support each other? That sort of thing. So there are ways to meet the needs that we're attempting to get met through the smoking that don't have the shadow of the smokescreen and the sort of, tricky, sticky, manipulative dynamics of those plant spirits attempting to get our attention. So we can take that attention to our purpose, to our mission, to our families, to our work in the world, and shine like the bright lights we are. I so want this for you. I appreciate your time, energy, and attention. I hope you found this helpful. Thank you so much, and blessings on your way.